Thriller is one of my favorite genres, but just like any genre, a lot of times they're either a hit or a miss. Having said that, every now and then I watch a movie, TV show, or read a book that absolutely blows me away. Over the years, this kind of feeling has become more and more rare, especially with movies. Due to the individual parts that are required to work well in order to make a great movie, something is almost always bound to miss. Sometimes, the movie or TV show is well written but badly casted. When it is well casted, the writing or directing could be an issue. Thankfully, every now and then, a talent will arise from some other corner of the world and make movies that are just the perfect package. Sometimes it's from Korea, sometimes it's from Japan or India, and in this case, Spain. The director I'll be talking about in this video is, and I'm sorry if I butcher the pronunciation, Oriol Paulo. He is a brilliant filmmaker responsible for some incredible thrillers. The reason I'll be talking about Paulo specifically is because not only does he write and direct these movies, but these thrillers are also very consistent with the quality. Whether it's the acting, the writing, the directing, or even the visuals. His movies are some of the best thrillers I've ever watched. Paulo has several filmmaking credits, but instead of going through all of the projects of this Spanish filmmaker, I'll be talking about his 4 main movies and a miniseries. To make sure no one is spoiled of the twists and turns in these, I'll mostly be giving the bare minimum of the plot. These thrillers are the kind you have to experience for yourself, so hopefully no spoilers in the comment section either. I'm also going to rate the movies and the miniseries at the end of each review. As for now, we'll go through the list based on the order at which I watched them. Let's start with my favorite of his, 2016's mystery thriller, The Invisible Guest. The Invisible Guest was my introduction to this talented storyteller, and boy, what an introduction this was. It has everything from great acting to amazing direction, fantastic writing, engaging pacing, and to polish it all off, great visuals throughout. The movie follows a multi-millionaire businessman named Adrian Doria as he wakes up in a hotel room with the dead body of his lover, Laura, next to him as he gets accused of her murder. He is bailed out temporarily, but to make sure that his outdoor stay becomes permanent, Adrian hires a high-profile lawyer, Virginia Goodman, to defend him. Virginia takes no shit from anyone and starts to investigate the case thoroughly, only to discover that there are a lot of inconsistencies in Adrian's story, from the hotel room being locked from the inside to his fingerprints on the murder weapon, and especially the lack of a motive or evidence which can prove that the culprit was anyone else but him. He first claims it was someone blackmailing them, but that excuse falls flat when Laura's body is found to be covered in money. Virginia starts to mercilessly drill him with all the facts and deductions, and soon Adrian realizes how difficult it will be for him to convince the whole jury given the inconsistencies in his story. The situation seems to get a lot more complex, however, as a new mystery is introduced. Backed into a corner and desperate for escape, Adrian confesses to a different crime, one that happened months ago, and how these two incidents may be connected. The movie goes back and forth between the night of Laura's murder and the incident that he and Laura were a part of months before. During the flashbacks, Adrian and Virginia find a new possible culprit, someone who they think could have blackmailed them and then killed Laura to frame him, a man with all the right motivations and determination to see him and his mistress fail. What follows is a sort of chess game level deduction that would make Sherlock Holmes proud on how, who, and why the whole thing even happened. Virginia tries to piece together what happened and build a defense for Adrian, but no matter what she does, something still feels off. Is Adrian truly an innocent man, or is he a wolf in sheep's clothing? The Invisible Guest is a suspenseful thriller that really forces you to pay attention as the characters piece together the puzzle of the mystery killer, all the while preparing you for a different reveal that will put the likes of Shutter Island to shame. That may sound like me overhyping this movie, but trust me, this movie is fantastic, and plot twists are this director's bread and butter, so to speak. This movie is honestly everything I've ever wanted and loved in a thriller. Great story, well-executed plot twist, thoroughly engaging mystery with amazing performances, and surprisingly polished visuals for a relatively low-budget movie. Like seriously, this movie has the budget of the Swedish version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and somehow is on par with the captivating filmmaking of the Fincher's adaptation. And I'll say this movie, at least for me, is far better than both of them combined. Not only that, this movie is also very rewatchable. There are so many details that you only notice afterwards when you know what you know about the story. This is one of those movies that you simply must watch if you're a thriller fan, and I'll give this movie a strong 9.5 out of 10. Next up, we have his 2018 supernatural thriller, Mirage. This is my least favorite of his movies, but it's still a solid watch. The movie follows Vera, a doctor who, with her husband and daughter, recently moved into a new neighborhood. When preparing the house, she finds an old TV, some cassette tapes, and a camera left by the previous occupant. Turns out, there was a kid who used to live in this house who recorded himself playing music 25 years ago. Using flashbacks, we are shown that the little boy was hit by a car and died on the spot. He was running away from his neighbor who had just killed his wife. Flash forward to to present time, and it seems there's a storm coming, a similar one that came all those years ago, the night of the little boy's death. This is where Mirage stands out from this director's usual filmography. Unlike his other movies that are pure thrillers, this one has a supernatural element to it. Vera is woken up in the middle of the night and sees the TV playing on its own. It's pretty much a generic horror movie trope when she toys with the TV, but instead of the kid's ghost haunting her or something, the kid is shown to be alive. Somehow, Vera from the present time is communicating with the boy decades ago. Not only that, she talks to him moments before he was supposed to die in his timeline. She convinces him not to go to his neighbor, which saves his life. Unfortunately for her, this leads to a butterfly effect where Vera wakes up in a different timeline, but with her original memories intact. In this timeline, the boy survived, but her life completely changed. She had given up her career to have a child, despite being both good and passionate at it. In this timeline, she never even met her husband, which means her daughter was never born. Her husband, her ex-boyfriend, her neighbors, not even a single person outside her job even knows her, and even the ones who do know her only know this timeline's version of her. She misses her daughter and wants to get back to her, but the more she tries to convince people, the more she comes across as a crazy person. The story is about her finding a way out of this madness so that she can go back to her daughter. Despite the larger-than-life time travel alternative universe setting, the core of the story is about a mother who just wants to go back to her child. This is the kind of personal stakes story that The Flash tried to pull off, but got lost in all the CGI, blockbuster nostalgia mumbo-jumbo. Mirage is evidence that if you are creative enough, even a small-scale domestic thriller can get the adrenaline pumping just as much, if not more so, than many big-budget action thrillers with similar premise. Personally, I've never been a fan of supernatural things happening in thriller movies. I love thrillers partly because of their realistic and grounded nature. No one with superpowers, no dragons, no time travel, or haunted houses anywhere. I don't dislike those things by any means, but I personally don't think that suspense thrillers or crime thrillers are a genre for such elements. Thrillers are basically like horror movies, but without the ghosts. The real danger in this genre always comes from the people and their circumstances, which appeals to me greatly. Having said that, there are always exceptions to the rule, like The Prestige, the Final Destination franchise, and of course, 2018's Mirage. This movie is a bit more dramatic and a little convoluted at times compared to the rest of his movies, but the technical aspects like the acting, the story, the twists, and the reveals are still very well done and more than make up for the minor flaws. In conclusion, if you love creative thrillers that experiment with multiple genres whilst keeping up a relatively personal story that keeps you engaged from beginning to end, I highly recommend Mirage, and I'll give this movie an 8 out of 10. The next movie on the list is also his debut thriller, The Body. Technically, his debut thriller was this TV movie called Ecos, but I can't find it anywhere, so The Body it is. Besides, that one was a TV movie that came out 6 years before this, so I'm not sure how much creative control he had on that project compared to this one. In this mystery thriller, a man is brought to the police headquarters in order to question him regarding his deceased wife. She was a rich woman who was far older than him and died of an heart attack, or so it was reported as. However, before a proper autopsy could be done, the body mysteriously disappeared from the morgue. The only person who last saw the body was the morgue security guard, who is currently in the hospital. He was running out of the morgue as if he saw a ghost and got hit by a car, and is currently unconscious. Unlike The Mirage, this movie is not supernatural, but it does feel like it at times. Things appear and disappear while the husband is at the police station, just like in a horror movie. To the point I started to wonder if the guy was mentally unstable and hallucinating these events. Thankfully, those scenes actually contribute to the story organically later on. This movie's story shares many similarities with David Fincher's Gone Girl. Both movies have detectives investigating a disappearance. Both suspect the husband of doing one thing only to reveal that he's guilty of a different thing. They both even have young mistresses and are largely dependent on their wife's finances. And both movies have plot twists that put the thrill back in thriller. Although, I'll admit, I personally prefer the twist and reveals in The Body far more compared to Gone Girl, which came out 2 years later. Having said that, Gone Girl is far more grounded, while The Body is a bit dramatic at times. Thankfully, it's only in the first half, and it also serves the story organically as a payoff later on. Overall, this was an amazing debut by him, and I give this movie a 9 out of 10. Next up, we have his most recent thriller, the 2022 Netflix movie, God's Crooked Lines. The movie follows Alice, a private investigator who pretends to be mentally unstable so that she can investigate what happened in this asylum a year ago. However, her search for answers doesn't go as smoothly as she had hoped, since not only is she literally surrounded by mostly unreliable sources inside the facility, but halfway through the movie, she realizes that she can't rely on people outside either, be it the people who hired her, since she can't contact them, or the doctors who are not fully trusting of her due to her own fabricated mental state. She tries to get out of the asylum, but as she would soon realize, it's easier said than done. While she goes through all this struggle, we're forced to wonder whether Alice herself has been an unreliable narrator so far, without even realizing it. While all this is happening, we also have a separate timeline going, where people are investigating a gruesome murder of a patient in the same asylum. These two storylines merge together at the end, providing one satisfying climax, as all the puzzle pieces move themselves in their right places and settle in. When I read the synopsis for this story, I couldn't help but see that there were some similarities with the Frida McFadden novel called War D. Thankfully, This movie is based on a different novel of the same name that came out decades ago. The story is still a somewhat mix of War D, Shutter Island, and The Silent Patient. So if you like any of those thrillers, you may also enjoy this one. I'll give this an 8.5 out of 10. And finally, we have the miniseries 2021's The Innocent. For this 8-episode miniseries, it seems Paulo united the cast of The Body and The Invisible Guest in one. The story follows a man who, at the party with his brother, accidentally kills someone during a fight that he did not even start. As a result of it, he spends 4 years in prison. When he gets out of jail, he tries to rebuild his life. He gets married, his wife is pregnant, and he's moved into a new house. Everything looks great until it isn't. Nothing is what it seems to be, as more and more secrets from the past reveal themselves. The consequences of the past events come back to haunt his new life. The man whose friend he accidentally killed all those years ago is his new neighbor. The man whose son he killed and went to prison for is a doctor at the very hospital his wife is currently checking up at. To make matters worse, his wife goes out for a job-related thing, but it just so happens she never got to the hotel she said she'd be staying at. No one knows where she went, and as if that's not enough, 50,000 euros from her joint account has been taken out without him being informed. While all this is happening, there's a separate murder mystery going on. The investigation of a possibly murdered nun with a dark backstory, which is somehow connected to him. This story has more plot twists and reveals than M. Night Shyamalan's whole career, except almost all the twists in here are actually good. Just like how Hitchcock is the master of suspense and Tarantino is the master of dialogue, this miniseries establishes Oriol Paulo as the master of setup and payoffs. Each episode is full of scenes that don't seem all that much on the surface, but are actively establishing little details that will pay off in a different scene later on, which makes the twists and turns that much more satisfying. After shows with lackluster storytelling like Loki, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and She-Hulk that could have been condensed into a movie if written smartly, The Innocent made me realize how effective the miniseries medium can be when handled well. This is one of those stories that could not have worked with a movie at all due to the sheer scale of it. Each episode has a brilliantly placed cliffhanger that reveals new information that further puts you at the edge of your seat. This series is a collection of all Oriol Paulo's trademark storytelling, but on steroids. It could confuse you if you're watching this expecting a simple thriller with a straightforward plot, because this is anything but simple. There are clues on top of clues, character introductions within flashbacks. This series has everything from tragic backstories to montages to espionage to car chases to Tarantino-style shootouts. Just like in his movies, even the scenes that you think are either plot holes or inconsistencies more often than not turn out to be puzzle pieces that'll only make sense once you know the twists. This is one of the few miniseries I've watched that in just a span of 8 episodes takes you through a roller coaster of emotions, to the point you may feel like pausing the show just so the characters can catch a break. For a story with so many moving parts, I was surprised how well paced it was. Not a single scene felt wasted, and each scene followed the next organically. I watched just one episode of this show, not expecting much, since just because the storyteller is good at one medium doesn't mean they'll necessarily be great at another by default. For example, Vince Gilligan is an excellent showrunner who made 2 of the best TV shows ever, but when he tried to make a movie, we ended up with a rather mediocre one. There are very few people who can jump between different mediums with equal success. Thankfully, Paulo is one of them, as he nails the tone and pacing and uses this episodic structure to the best of his abilities by providing us with one of the best bingeable miniseries I have ever seen. I'll give this masterpiece a 9 out of 10. The amazing quality of these projects are the result of the passion and talent this filmmaker has, and I'm so glad that he's not even close to stopping anytime soon. He is still far away from the likes of Hitchcock or Tarantino, but then again, he's also very new. Given how prolific this guy is, sooner or later, he'll get to the legendary status he deserves. I personally think he's already up there with directors like David Fincher. Just like Fincher, Paulo's films are very well made with stellar visuals, sharp writing, and great performances throughout. If you're a fan of thrillers, especially the ones that deal with the themes of trust, infidelity, lust, greed, lies, betrayal, and secrets, all the while keeping you hooked with amazing plot twists and unreliable narrators, I highly recommend checking out this writer-director's works. You may not end up loving all his projects, but I guarantee you will at the very least have a fun time with them. Is there some other film or filmmaker that you'd like for me to talk about? If so, leave me a comment. And if you're in mood for some psychological thriller with twists, reveals, and a possible unreliable narrator that gives you similar vibes and themes as this filmmaker, check out my novel, New Address. You have no idea how much inspiration I've taken from similar storytellers when I wrote my own thriller. You can pause and read the book synopsis on screen right now. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.